Okay. Yay! We are live. We are live. Okay, cool. Well, good afternoon if you are in South Africa. Well, it's afternoon, evening if you're in South Africa. But I know that there's other people who also join us from other parts of the world. Good morning, good day, and hello to everybody who's really gonna watch this, listen to this days, months, years after we have gone live. My name is Bongeka Mhlongo, and I am the author of this book, Thinking in Full Color, Multicolored Ideas for Conversations, which is really the foundation piece for the Full Color Leader Series Conversations. I am excited to have yet again another installment of the Full Color Leader Series Conversation. And I'm joined by Matt Slaughter. And we're really going to be digging deep into a very interesting topic that I hope everybody's going to enjoy. I think they will. I think they will. Even the people who are not nerds, I think you will. Matt is cool, so he will be able to explain it to us. So yeah, our topic for today is Earth, Stone, and Time, an archaeologist's journey into the deep past. Hmm. We'll get into that. So, Matt, how are you doing? How are you feeling this Thursday afternoon in South Africa?
I'm good, thanks, Bongeka. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I know we've been speaking for some months, if not longer, waiting for this to happen. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that we're here today. And yeah, thanks very much. It's great to be here. Yeah, my name is Matt Lauder. I'm an archaeologist at the University of the Witwatersrand. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Geography, Archaeology, and Environmental Studies.
Yeah, awesome, Matt. So maybe also just for the guys, I want everybody to participate as much as I'm facilitating this conversation, and Matt is really our guest speaker from a content and expertise point of view. But I want everybody to participate. So one of the first things we're gonna do a bit of an icebreaker. Um, and the icebreaker is please type it in the chat just around what have you heard about archaeology? It could be anything. Like, what do you think it is? I'll tell you, for me, I think archaeology, I think caves, I think people who were full of dust. And that's really influenced by documentaries that what we have watched, because there's been a lot of documentaries as human beings. I think they still a massive fascination about the past, and I think, Matt, you will color for us why there is such a fascination about the past. So everybody, yeah, type in, and even as we go along in the conversation, please can you just, yeah, write your questions, whatever ahas, comments that you probably are getting as we are going, yeah, as we are having this conversation with Matt, because we all want this to be a collective conversation. Anyway, so let us begin. Matt, you've obviously introduced yourself. So
Mm.
maybe the first segment of this that I want us to begin with is where it all began. Right. So maybe first things first, what is archaeology in layman's terms? Um, I know you have a scientific definition. Maybe let's start with this layman and then the scientific definition, so that your other peers in the field will see that we're doing due diligence.
Due diligence. No, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Bongeka. It's a very good question. And I mean, I often get asked that when people say to me, just general people that I meet on the street, oh, what do you do for a living? And I'll tell them, oh, I'm an archaeologist. You get the kind of standard responses. A, what is that? B, oh, so you study dinosaurs. So I'm expecting some comments to pop
Yes.
up in the chat about dinosaurs. What you said about dust and caves is pretty much spot on. Not that we only ever work in caves. We also do work in open air landscapes as well. But
Yeah.
dust is absolutely a very important component of what it is that we do as archaeologists, whether we're in the field excavating sediments where there's loose dust coming up, or we
Yeah.
stuck in the lab working on collections, legacy collections in museums, and you can imagine the thick layers of dust that sit on those
Mm,
artifacts that have been in boxes for several decades. So just in terms of what archaeology is, essentially what I like to tell people is that we are detectives of the past. I could use
mm,
crime scene investigators
sure.
as an example. If you think CSI Miami, whereas instead of us looking at crimes that have happened in the modern day, and it's not always crimes, we're essentially looking at material evidence of our
Mm,
human past to understand how
sure.
we've lived in the past. We look at bits of, of,
Sure.
of rock, stone tools, for example, pieces of pot. We look at old ancient
Mm,
structures. And by looking at all of that evidence kind of collectively, in addition to working out where it is on the landscape, we can
mm,
then start to piece together the puzzles as you would as a crime scene investigator. You piece together these
mm,
various puzzles
sure.
of what exactly we were doing at that particular point in time. Obviously, as archaeologists, we study
Mm,
various periods through time, which are
mm,
characterized by kind of specific types of artifacts, specific types of technology. Some of us specialize in particular periods. I specialize in the Stone Age, for example.
mm,
So really, it's all about linking or coming up with these questions about how it is that we've lived in the past. And
mm,
answering those questions directly through looking at evidence of material culture, physical, tangible artifacts that
sure.
we have made and left behind in the past, which are then preserved either on the ground or buried in
Mm.
layers under the ground, in caves, under dust, for example.
And the dust.
Yeah.
Sure, Matt. So, thank you for giving such a beautiful and a comprehensive, I suppose, explanation and definition. And I'm curious, people tend to, particularly, when you go to school, people always think of careers in the sense of capitalism, and I'm being very like intentional by saying that. And capitalism
Mm,
meaning, how can I get into a career where I'm going to make money, most
mm,
money? Yes, nowadays I know there's emerging trends around social media, content creation, and all of that, but I always find people who go into fields like yours, I find them to be unicorns, fascinating. So I'm curious to know your story, like where it began for you. How did you know? How did you land up in the field that you're in right now?
Bongeka, it's a very good question. And what you mentioned about capitalism is very interesting, actually.
Mm,
So I'll tell you and your listeners a little bit about my journey in terms of how I fell in love with archaeology, because that's really what it is.
mm,
It's a
mm,
love for
sure.
learning, and it's a love for exploring and doing these things. But to just preface this by saying that I grew up in a household where my father, he worked in a large kind of financial company for several
Mm,
decades. So I was kind of exposed to certainly the more capitalistic side of things.
sure.
Um, and I don't know if that maybe, I don't know, changed my thoughts about my career path.
Mm,
Coming back to your theme with this series, Bongeka, about
mm,
living in full color and just appreciating all
mm,
that's out there and knowledge generation and just the process of learning. For me, that's important. The
mm,
process of learning. And for me, I found that through archaeology, but it was a very kind of non-linear path. So to maybe start, the one thing that happened when I was younger, obviously growing up at home, was my parents used to take me and my two siblings outdoors a lot, which was great. We
mm.
were very fortunate, of course. I fully appreciate,
Yeah.
not everybody has the opportunity when growing up to get outdoors. We would go on
Mm,
hikes and stuff. We'd go to the bush, and we really appreciated those trips. We'd do them every now and then. So I grew up in a household where we valued the outdoors.
mm,
We valued getting, outside and stuff, and throughout high school, I started to develop this very keen interest in everything to do with geography. I love geography, the clouds, the rain, the
sure.
weather, the landscapes, all that type of thing, the plants, the animals. So I knew quite early on, in my
Mm,
kind of secondary school studies that I wanted to study geography at university.
Mm.
at Wits was a logical choice because I grew up in Johannesburg, so
Mm.
I knew that they had a very good geography program there. So geography was then the one major that I had, on my mind. But when I got to Wits on orientation day, and I'm hoping that some of your listeners will identify with what I'm
Yeah.
about to say. And I know we spoke about this last week when we connected
Yeah.
before the meeting today. I was very unsure. I was very unsure what
Yeah.
my second major was going to be, and I was very unsure where my career path was going to go. And I think as a first year university student, you feel almost pressured to make that choice there and then,
Mm.
so that you can then plot your career going forward. When now we know, and I know subsequently, working with students as I do now in my position, we often have these linear paths, and you don't necessarily have to make the right decision right from the start. But
Mm.
be that as it may, I knew geography was going to be my one major. So when I arrived at Wits on orientation day, day one at Wits,
Mm.
bright-eyed, completely naive, as one does as a first year,
As
but
everyone does.
excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
but excited, and,
Yeah.
and and there was a vibe, and there's music. You know what it's like orientation day,
Yeah.
or
Absolutely.
orientation week, whatever it is now. So I got to campus and I signed up for geography, and I was very happy. And then I realized the penny dropped. I need to have a second major. So I was standing
Mm.
around at the geography table, and I saw there was a
Mm.
table next to it, and the table said archaeology, and there was some nice pictures and stuff and whatever. And
Uh,
there was a gentleman standing there at the table. So I walked up to him and I said, "Oh, what is this archaeology about? Tell me about it," because I too had no idea, no idea.
sure.
We don't learn enough. I think at the secondary school level to fully appreciate what
Yes.
archaeology is about
Yes.
as a
Mm.
science, as a discipline.
Mm.
So I said to him, "Look, what is this all about?" And at the time, it was Professor Ben Smith, who was the director of the Rock Art Research Institute, which forms part of our
Mm.
school, Geography, Archaeology, Environmental Studies. So Professor Smith said to me, he said, "Well, it's a really interesting discipline. You get to travel the world, you get to meet cool, interesting people, you get to work on amazing artifacts." And he spoke to me about
Mm.
a life of experience. He didn't talk
Mm.
to me about
Mm.
a life of capitalism. He didn't say to
Mm.
me, you're going to be
Mm.
chasing
Mm.
the
Mm.
buck.
Mm.
It was all
Sure.
about the the experiences and the
Sure.
enrichment and the learning, and I mean, immediately then I thought, you know what, this sounds fantastic. It was right up my alley because obviously I thought back to
Sure.
my childhood, growing up, being outdoors. I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to learn about another aspect
Mm.
of the environment of our landscape, and I'm going to be looking at artifacts and things like that. So I was very keen. I chose archaeology as a second major, but obviously I was still, we're still
Mm.
very early days, and I hadn't had attended a single lecture yet. So fast forward a couple of days, and then week one started. I then attended the first lecture, day one, with a lecturer who was lecturing in the department at the time, Professor Amanda Esterhazen. And she was
Mm.
teaching basically an introductory course to archaeology, as one does at first year level,
Yes.
introducing us to the concepts of what archaeology is. And to come back to
Mm.
your question about what it is, she very cleverly taught us about a discipline that's called garbology. And
Mm.
garbology is really the science of us looking at um, material waste that humans leave today, and we can then look at
Sure.
that waste, that rubbish that we leave, to essentially understand how we live. So you could look at somebody's
Wow.
rubbish, for example,
Wow.
looking at what types of food they eat, what types of
Mm.
cool drink they drink. You can work out where they go to work potentially just by looking at the rubbish that they've left behind. And that's essentially what archaeology is all about. We're looking at all that material evidence that's been left behind in the form
Mm.
of stone tools, ceramics,
Mm.
rock art, for example. There's
Mm.
all these different kind of tangible aspects of heritage that allow us to understand what we have as humans have been doing. And immediately after that lecture, day one with Professor Amanda Esterhazy, I was like,
Mm.
"That's it. I'm sold. I'm sold." I knew the penny dropped. I don't know, and
Yeah.
again, I'm hoping maybe some of your listeners will identify with this. Some of them maybe
Yeah.
not. I know we're not all fortunate enough to be able to have those
Yes.
penny drop moments. Sometimes they
Yeah.
happen. Sometimes they happen, and we don't even know they've
Mm.
happened. So sometimes it
Mm,
happens organically through time. And as I mentioned, a lot of people, when they get into archaeology, their route is very non-linear. So I was
mm,
very fortunate to have those penny drop moments. And then I obviously then went throughout undergrad at Wits, studying both geography and archaeology, and picking up various other subjects as well. And then it's pretty much
mm.
been downhill since then. Yeah. And that's obviously what I
Down
specialized
here.
in. Yeah. So to come back to
Yeah.
your question, I think I was
Sure.
certainly as a child kind of
Mm,
exposed to certain things which put me in a
sure.
more favorable position to be at least enthusiastic about these types of
Sure.
concepts, if that makes sense.
Sure. 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 Matt, you dropped a lot of gems there. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
sorry, I apologize if I was talking too long. I see there's some questions have come in there as well, but
yeah.
yeah, it's certainly been an interesting journey, and particularly what Professor Ben Smith shared with me that day about a
Sure.
life of experience.
And life of, yeah, so yo, that's why I'm so when you see me pause is because my brain is like, wow. So then I don't have the words, right? Okay, but there's two main ones that I want to just bring to the fore that really is incredible. You spoke about like childhood experiences and how your parents, you guys went outside and a lot hiking, whatever it is, exploring landscapes. I think that's so powerful as an idea that I want people to connect to because I have is it philosophy, is it an ideology? Okay, let's say it's an ideology. I
Mhm.
have an ideology that you dream more when you're exposed to more. So a lot of the times, and that's why I fundamentally believe young people, children, should be given a wide range of experiences because
Mm,
you can only dream to the level of your exposure. And
mm,
so I think that for just as an idea, as you shared that really deeply resonated with me because all of us actually have various fortunate experiences. I think of my own childhood that because of my parents' exposure to many things, I was able to dream more than more
mm.
other people. The conversations that we had at home, the conversations that I had in my community, that expands your mind. And then another one that you just said with Professor Ben, is it Professor Ben? A
Professor Ben
life of
Smith, yeah, yeah.
Professor Ben Smith, what a life of experience. And
Or
I think that is
experiences, I should say plural,
experiences.
because it's experiences exactly. Yeah,
Sure,
it's yeah, yeah.
sure. Um, what a powerful way to think about one's career. And I think again, considering that uh most of the time when you ask as a young person what do you want to be when you grow up, it's such a transactional thing. It's about I go to work, I
Yeah.
want to be a doctor, you earn money, and then that's why people you start working at I don't know at 22, you retire at 65. And there's something about that that's very robotic that does not that I personally reject and I don't
I,
like, right?
I
Yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up because it was
yeah,
literally on the tip of my tongue. We taught through secondary school, and
yeah,
I'm sure it's still the case. Now, obviously, I was in secondary school some time ago now, but you get those
yeah,
tests that they do to kind of figure out what career path you would be suitable for.
yeah, for
This is a bit of a sidetrack here, just
yeah.
for a laugh. I did that in, I think, grade 11 of matric, and it came
Yeah.
back saying that I should be a grave digger. A grave digger.
Whoa!
Yeah. So that back then, there was
So
obviously
there was
some
there
writing
was
on the wall somewhere,
something. Yeah.
something. But
Sure.
but the reason why I say that is because yes, we have
Wow.
this. There is this this idea that we are asked, what do we want to be when we grow up, a doctor, a lawyer,
Yes.
whatever. When
Yeah.
really the question should be, I
Mm.
don't know,
What?
who do you want to become, or what
Mm.
what kind of
What kind of
experiences do you want to
life
have in your
experience?
life?
Absolutely.
What
Yeah.
person do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
It's a bit
Absolutely.
different, because
Yeah.
obviously our careers are very important. I mean, I love what I
Yes.
do,
Yes.
whether you're
Yes.
in finance, whether you're an
Yeah.
accountant, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
a career is still a means to live a life. So it's still a case
Mm.
of then what are you going to do with your career to then create that life of experience, which is where you're going to get
Sure.
your enrichment, from
And
those
fun.
experiences, which is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow, man. You know what? Let me, because there's a lot and we don't have much time. I'm enjoying, yeah, I'm enjoying your ahas. But let's maybe go back to the topic a little bit deeply.
Mm.
You spoke about that you obviously all have various specializations, right, in archaeology, and you
Yeah.
specialize in the Stone Age. I think that's what you mentioned.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are the different specializations and what drew you to specialize in the Stone Age?
Yeah, I mean, I again, just coming back to people having these non-linear kind of routes in life. When I was
Mm,
studying my undergrad and then coming to the end of my undergrad, I then needed to just decide what I wanted to potentially specialize in for a career.
mm,
As students, and then this is something I tell my undergrads, you really have to continually you have to try and position yourself and to
mm,
create a set of skills so that by the time you reach the postgraduate level, you are already deliberately trying to think about how you can enter the marketplace, the professional
mm.
workspace,
Yeah.
because no one's guaranteed a job, especially not in our country, given the context, high unemployment rate.
Yes.
We have to be
Yes.
very
Yes.
deliberate, and
Yeah.
no one can guarantee you a job. Your first year lecturer is not going to sit you down and say,
Absolutely.
right, this is a class of 200, you're all going to get jobs by the end of it. He'd lose his job, unfortunately. And it's
Absolutely.
unfortunately the reality of the situation is not just South Africa, it's across the world. So
Yeah.
one has to be quite deliberate with how you position yourself. So throughout undergrad, I just exposed myself to a lot. Coming back to what you mentioned with your
Mm,
childhood, if
mm,
you can expose yourself to as much as possible, you can then think a little bit bigger and broader, and
mm,
then try and position yourself. So I went on as many field schools or field work opportunities as I possibly could. There were
mm,
various colleagues in the department who were doing research. There were various postgrad students who were doing research. Yeah, so then I volunteered on a lot of those trips and stuff. So that helped. It helped me narrow down two areas of focus: Stone Age and rock art. I really,
mm,
really enjoyed rock art, but I love Stone Age just as much. And then I ended up doing a very interesting geomorphology module in geography in
mm,
third year, which really threw a spanner in the works because then I had three things that I was very interested in. So in the end, I was able to narrow it down to two things to to combine both Stone Age archaeology with geomorphology in what we call geoarchaeology, which essentially is
mm,
looking at how artifacts are preserved on the landscape and then how those landscapes have changed and evolved through time. Very, very much to do with understanding the age of particular landscapes and how they've been shaped and why we have artifacts in certain areas. So I really enjoyed that, specializing in geoarchaeology and Stone Age studies. But there is such an array of specializations that one can do. And
mm.
I would be doing a disservice to archaeology in general if I sat here saying, right, well, you could specialize in Stone Age, you could specialize in Iron Age, which is a younger
Yeah.
chronological period. But really, our work now is so multidisciplinary. And just to talk about
Yeah.
our School of Geography, Archaeology, and Environmental Studies a bit more broadly, there's a lot of
Sure.
collaboration going on. I'm working
Mm,
with colleagues in China and in Europe as well. And a lot of people are combining their ideas and working across different time periods, using different methods across different time periods. So really, the range of specializations now is quite broad. It's now about upskilling yourself with understanding particular methods,
mm.
particular approaches, particular technology, even, in this age of AI. I know that was one of the things we were going to maybe talk a little bit
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
There is so much opportunity now for these multidisciplinary studies. So really, it's almost as if we have a melting pot of, from a
Mm,
research perspective, it's very exciting because you can kind of dip your toe in
mm,
different things. And again, coming back to learning, it's really nice and exciting, and you can work with different colleagues to ask different questions across many different periods. So yeah, there's a full spectrum of periods and artifacts to work on. Some more lab-based
mm.
research, and some more field-based. And getting into the field is really what kind of made me fall in love with archaeology. Again,
Sure.
reminding me of my childhood, getting out into the mountains and going on hikes and
Mountains.
stuff. So
Yeah.
field work was always very important for me.
So I listen to you and the passion. And because I sit in the seat of a facilitator, I know somebody's then is going to ask, all right, you guys do all this amazing work. As you said, you're detectives of the past. So
Mm,
what? So what value does that add for us as a modern society?
mm. It's a good question, and it's a very tough question, and it's something that I
Mm,
try and grapple with every year with the students that we have coming through. Not only at Wits, I was at other universities prior to being at Wits as well. And what we tend to struggle with is getting young students or even members of the public, whoever, to just appreciate what we have,
mm,
and the value in that. Um, in
mm,
Southern Africa and the African continent, we have such an incredibly rich archaeological record that spans, millions of years, essentially tracking our existence as a species, and even before our species.
mm,
Tracking human evolution over a very long period of time,
mm,
essentially by looking at archaeology and some of the questions we can ask, we're understanding how we've lived as a species for millions of years.
mm, mm,
And in terms of then framing that with what is going on in the world at the moment,
mm,
we have lived through climate change as a species many times. We have gone
mm,
through cycles of hot climates, dry climates, cold climates. We've had to adapt. We've moved into different environments. We've moved into different landscapes as a species, as groups on the landscape. We've interacted with each other. We've shared technologies. We've shared ideas.
mm,
Those ideas have proliferated and have facilitated our survival in these different types of environments. So, while yes, it's very easy to say, right, well, who cares about the past? But really,
yeah.
the past provides so much clarity in terms of how we respond as a species today. We are going through many of the
Mm,
same problems.
sure.
We have gone through these massive technological and climatic shifts in the past, and we continue to do it today. With
Mm,
human-induced climate change, of course, and now as we stand on the precipice of generative AI, or AI in general,
yeah.
an incredible technology which brings with it many opportunities, but potential issues as well. So this is what we're navigating as
Yeah.
a species. So we absolutely need to look back into the past to see how we have circumnavigated, some of these issues, to then plot a way forward. And it's something I try and bring across to my students in a course which I teach on ancient civilizations. It's a kind
Mm,
of introductory first year course which looks at ancient civilizations and
yeah.
how things have how things like climate and the environment have changed through time, and how we as complex societies have obviously adapted to those changes. But one thing I just want to maybe
Mm,
mention, Bongeka, is that Africa and Southern Africa has such an incredibly rich archaeological record,
mm,
and we are able to talk about human evolution across
mm,
millions of years. We have the cradle of humankind, for example, just to use as
mm,
an example, caves like Stekfontein and Swartkrans. We can understand our collective journey as a
mm,
species. The value of that is incredible. We're talking about how we have come to be who we are today across millions of years. That is essentially an African story, and it needs to
mm,
be told by African scholars. So
mm,
really, we have a
mm,
responsibility,
mm,
as African scholars, to tell the story of our collective human past, our journey as a species, really.
mm. Sure. I suppose one would then ask, sure, we definitely understand, we appreciate our archaeological. Yo, you see English now. Yo, my dad English. That this rich history that we have, right?
Mm,
But one would ask to say, you look at the context of South Africa, particularly with some of the socio-economic and socio-political issues that we face.
mm,
And one would ask, are they clues? Are they insights from some of the studies and the research that archaeologists do that can inform policy that will make people's lives better?
It's a very good question. It's a tough
Mm,
question, but again, these
mm,
are questions that need to be asked.
mm,
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of policy, it's a little bit tricky to answer, but if I could talk maybe a bit more pragmatically about just human responses, for example. Um,
mm,
if there's a colleague of mine, she does research in the Mpumalanga province,
mm,
and she looks at how early Iron Age communities practice agriculture within a
mm,
particular landscape. And some of the kind of tangible evidence that we see there is that humans living on the landscape were actively managing their farm, their cropping land, in the
mm,
sense that they were developing these agricultural terraces upon which to, plant their artifacts and their crops and stuff. In other words, to subsist on the landscape. Those are age-old practices that are
mm,
still relevant today. We
mm,
have incredible issues. Lesotho is a prime example of landscapes that are just completely mismanaged and are subjected to incredible rates of erosion where the landscape is essentially just washing away. I don't know what the stats are for Lesotho, but the amount of soil erosion is just absolutely incredible. And it comes back to mismanagement of the landscape, very much overgrazing, incorrect agricultural practices, things like that. And by looking back into the past and having a look at how people were managing the landscape,
mm,
living in harmony essentially with the landscape,
mm.
we can
Yeah,
then use those same approaches and
insights.
and and exactly, yeah, and apply them in the modern day, and then make them work to essentially improve people's lives. Yeah.
Mm. You remind me of one of my favorite thinkers that I often listen to. There's a phrase he often uses to say, "There's nothing new under the sky. What is new is the people who are experiencing it."
Mhm.
Right? So because we are new in a particular age, the thing
Mhm.
feels new.
It's
But
very
and
true. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and its delivery may be new. Of course, we may say, oh, but aeroplanes didn't exist, but the concept of transportation thingy is not in itself new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Matt, let's get into the fun stuff. Can you share like a fun or a wild discovery from your field work that you once made, like something that will make all of us like, wow, so you guys discovered those kind of things?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, field work, getting back to the research, just getting into the bush and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, that's really what it's all about for me at least. Obviously, some of my
Yeah.
colleagues do different type of research, but for me, it's always been nice to get into the ground and to excavate and to see
Mm.
for the first time an artifact get exposed that's been buried under the ground for, a
Mm.
couple of 100,000 years, million years, potentially.
Yeah.
Some of the sites that I've had the privilege of working in have been over 1 million years. So, one
Sure.
thing I would like to mention, there's two things actually, which are quite cool. The one was a discovery that we made when I did my honors postgraduate studies when I was at Wits, and we actually went and did our field work in the Fredefort Dome at a site there very close to the Vaal River. And
Mm.
as a class, we were excavating a particular site and stuff, and we were there for a couple of weeks and stuff. And what we were digging into this kind of very small rock shelter, kind of very kind of soft, silty layers of sand and dust,
Mm.
as we mentioned. And we pulled out a stone tool, but it wasn't just any stone tool.
Mm.
Because stone tools are quite common. People often ask me as a Stone Age archaeologist, "Oh, do you find anything?" And the benefit is that stone is very resistant. So we we find stone
Mm.
across the landscape, and we know
Mm.
exactly what to look for when identifying stone tools. So they do tend to preserve quite well. But we excavated a particular layer, and we excavated a stone arrowhead. But an arrowhead was about two
Arrowhead.
centimeters. Yeah, it was about two
Sure.
centimeters
Yeah.
in size, perfectly kind of shaped so that it could be
Sure.
hafted into a wooden shaft. Absolutely incredible. Now, the reason why it was quite exciting is because at that point in time,
Yeah.
with all the excavations that have been happening in South Africa, ever
Mm.
since archaeological studies began, and kind of rigorous kind of scientific archaeological work has been going on in South Africa for at least 150, 200 years, I would say.
Mm.
I stand to be corrected. But there were at that point in time, there was only about 40 or 45 of those little stone arrowheads.
So, sure.
And we've excavated, hundreds of Stone Age sites. It was really quite incredible to be able to see that. I was trying to find the picture so I could share it with you. I would be
Yeah.
happy to share it afterwards. Maybe we can link it in with the end of the
Yeah.
video or whatever. But it's an
Yeah.
amazing little perfect stone arrowhead. And if I could
Mm.
maybe just for the listeners, benefit to the listeners, just to explain a little bit how difficult it is to flake stone in such a way that you can
Mm.
create an arrowhead that is perfectly
Sure.
symmetrical, thin and sharp. It takes an incredible amount of skill,
Mm.
manipulation, an incredible amount of decision making as well,
Mm.
in order to produce
Mm.
that artifact. So yeah, so that was quite exciting. Another very cool thing, it's
Mm.
I can't claim this discovery, but very often as archaeologists, we get to work with amazing material and
Mm.
amazing fossils and things like that. I had the immense privilege of working with Professor Ron Clark. Professor Ron Clark is the researcher that found Littlefoot, which is a
Okay. Yeah.
hominid Australopithecus prometheus, which was found in the Stagfantine caves. I think it was in the mid to
Mm.
late 90s.
Mm.
That specimen was then dug out very painstakingly over about
Mm.
2 decades because it was preserved in this very hard rock,
Mm.
this what we call a cave breccia. So
Mm.
essentially, it had to be chiseled out. All of these bones, these fossils, had to be chiseled out of this very hard rock concrete. And I had the privilege of documenting and photographing every
Mm.
single bone of Littlefoot. Littlefoot is regarded as the
Mm.
most complete hominin in the world. It's been dated to
Prominent.
3.67 hominin. Yeah,
Mm.
it's been dated to 3.67 million years, and it's
Mm.
90 to 95% complete.
Mm.
So that was just an incredible experience to be able to work with Professor Clark, to handle
Mm.
the bones, to take the photos from different angles, and to provide a full catalogue of that specimen. It was really, yeah, something quite special to work with
Sure.
something so old and something so meaningful and important to understanding again our collective human journey as a species. We're talking about pre-Homo, so it was a
Yeah.
really incredible specimen.
So tell me, and thanks for sharing these interesting discoveries. How do you know the way to find it? And again, I've worked in mining,
Mm.
but like obviously not as a miner, but kind of have a brief understanding of that they wouldn't just necessarily come to where we stay and start like opening
Mm.
up a shaft. So there's almost this technology and this process that they use that tells them, hey, there might be gold or coal or diamonds there, right? So, and there's a whole entire value chain and a process that is used to excavate the gold or whatever
Mm.
mineral that they're looking for. So how do you guys know where you need to go looking to find such discoveries?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it really comes down to us doing our homework before we get into the
Mm,
field.
sure.
And very often that's a lot of kind of sitting on GIS or Google Earth, having a look at the landscape, kind of
Uh,
figuring things out. And really, it starts in the library. It starts in the library because we
sure.
essentially are standing on the shoulders of many authors and scholars that have come before
Yes.
us.
Yes.
A lot of people have spent time, even early travelers, when European settlers first came to the country, as people kind of moved across the landscape, people recorded, interesting things here
Mm,
and there. And archaeologists have obviously continued to build up that record. We now have developed even more so local knowledge of people on the landscape in terms of what's where. And through time, we've developed this kind of general database, or at least general sense of what is on the landscape in particular areas. Of course, we find new things all the time. And it comes
mm,
back to surveying. In fact, I was just chatting with two colleagues this morning at WITS, colleagues from Europe, and they've been doing some surveying in some new areas. One of which was working in Namibia, and they chose to push into an area where they thought people had surveyed before. And
Sure.
they went onto a property and they found an incredible rock shelter
Sure.
that is just absolutely huge with archaeology kind of top to bottom. I'm
Mm.
probably exaggerating things a little bit here, but it sounds like this most amazing site.
Yeah.
And really, again, it just comes back to time on the landscape and surveying and
Mm.
generating that understanding of what is where. You mentioned that people wouldn't come, let's say, to your house and sink a pit and find archaeology, for example. It's a very good example. But one thing I will say is one of the sites that I'm working at is an incredible site. It's in the middle of Pretoria. It's
Mm.
just a little bit east of the Vonnegut Nature Reserve, in a little
Mm.
hiking trail park, little nature reserve area, and it's
Sure.
in the middle of the city, close to a kind of water reservoir in a very small, shallow valley. And there are hundreds of thousands of stone tools that we've been excavating
Sure.
there for the last couple of years. I'm working with a colleague of mine and other colleagues from the University of Johannesburg, and we've been excavating artifacts. We've had students join us over the last couple of years. I run
Mm.
my third year Wits Field School there. So sometimes the archaeology is where you least expect it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we knew about Vonnegut as an archaeological site because it was first located about, I think, 70 to 80 years ago, and was written about then. And then nobody had done any research for a while, so we have decided to reinvestigate the site. But yes, yeah, it really just comes with doing a lot of homework to figure out where things are.
Okay. So even the right way we stay, I could be living under a gold mine of archaeological discoveries.
Who knows? I like to be optimistic. That is absolutely possible. I went for a walk a couple of weeks back in the area where I stay,
Yeah.
and I found stone tools along the edge of the river. So, and I
So,
mean, that's a couple of, not even 100 meters from my house. So,
so,
yes, yeah,
and you
these
live in
these things are
Joburg.
around. I
Yeah.
live in Joburg, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it just proves your point that there's people and civilizations that have lived centuries before we came, and
Mm,
I think we should never lose sight of that. I know I see a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to
mm,
go to that, but before I go to the audience questions, so obviously right now, what is the topic that is on everybody's lips is this thing around artificial intelligence.
mm.
And I was quite curious around the field of archaeology in terms of, is there an impact of artificial intelligence in this field? And if so, what kind of impact do you foresee AI bringing?
Yeah, it's a very important question. AI, I think, is on the tip
Mm.
of everybody's tongue at the moment. I think
Yeah.
everybody is just struggling to try and keep up with the rate at which the technology is developing. But what I will say is it's
Yeah.
having a massive impact with archaeology because as with any scientific discipline,
Mm.
we work with data. Okay, and
Mm.
we generate models based on data. And obviously,
Mm.
the better we can make our models, the better we can make our models with more data, the more accurate our models are, and the more um, true to the story that we're trying to tell those models
Yeah.
become. And really, that's where AI is really beginning to facilitate us as archaeologists now
Mm.
being able to
Sure.
plug and play into these these much larger data sets where we can start to have these kind of, they call it blue sky thinking. We can really start to
Yes.
ask these much bigger, broader questions because we are now able to plug into more data sets and also data that has been collected at high resolution as well.
Mhm.
We also can leverage off of other additional technologies, things like predictive modeling. I've done some work with that in the past, where we can plug in all
Mm.
of this data and then really
Mm.
start to kind of figure out what humans were doing. And again, um, it means that we need to have more data, and we need to
Mm.
process that data more systematically. And AI
Mm.
is allowing us to do that. So
That's
really,
brilliant.
it's very
Sure.
exciting. I think. Not to talk on behalf of WITS, but at least I know from our school,
Yeah.
Geography, Archaeology, and Environmental Studies, yeah, we really trying to, um, position us, or at least place our students at the forefront of this technology. We
Yeah.
want them to understand what AI is, how
Yeah.
to use it, how not to use it, so how to use it ethically and responsibly, what the benefits are, what the potential shortfalls are, but really to
Mm.
be AI savvy. And I think obviously as
Mm.
educators nowadays, we have that
Yeah.
responsibility. And archaeology, just like any other scientific discipline, it's no different. Everybody's really trying to position themselves, I think, to take full advantage of what benefits AI is going to bring.
Sure. I mean, yes, of course, not to talk in behalf of it, but because I'm also there right now, I must say I'm quite impressed by the curriculum and even for
Mhm.
my program and the forward thinking, the intense mental. Yes, it seems intense, but I think we are being prepared for a future
Mm,
that definitely will be interfacing with AI, ethics,
mm,
sustainability, data, and
mm.
it's a delight really to be with such incredible minds, high resolution thinking minds. So yeah, you know what, Matt, I could go on and on with you, but unfortunately, I have to not be selfish and take other people's questions. So I will let me go through the audience questions and then the questions I still have, if we still have time,
Mm.
then I'll ask them. So one of the questions here is, how do archaeologists know that their interpretation is correct?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Mm,
So again, it comes back to working with all of the available information that we have.
mm,
And very often what we do as archaeologists is we combine data sets. And
mm,
this just comes back to doing good science, if I could use that expression. In order to come up with interpretations, you need to have the data. You
mm,
need to have used the correct methods to collect that data. The data needs to be robust, and ideally, you need multiple
mm,
data sets to make your conclusions robust, because then you can draw those data sets together. And if those data sets are aligning, they then allow you to come up with these interpretations. So it's obviously something that, as archaeologists, we're very conscious of.
mm.
But I think that goes for all scientific disciplines, really.
Yes.
When you have to make that final call. The one thing I will say, and talking from my own personal experience,
Mm,
um, as a researcher, as an
mm,
archaeologist, we we really tend to err on the side of caution. we
mm,
don't we don't overinterpret. We're
mm,
not we're
mm,
not we're
mm,
not
mm,
out there looking for headlines. We
mm.
really try
Sure,
and
sure,
essentially we're also trying to find as many of those puzzle pieces as possible to tell the
sure.
full story. And sometimes we only have a fraction of those puzzle pieces, but we have a hunch. We can
Mm,
see roughly the picture, and we can see the data is kind of coming together. So sometimes, it's quite difficult to make these calls. But I mean, that's really,
mm.
why we trained as archaeologists, why it takes a long time, to become an archaeologist, or a scientist in general, because the
Scientists, yeah,
principles the principles are all the
yeah,
same. You need to do
yeah.
good science, you need to ask the right questions, you need to have the right data
Mm,
to be able
mm.
to back up your interpretations.
Sure. I think you answered this, that like with that response, you answered there was a question here around how much of archaeology is fact versus an educated guess. I think as you
Mm.
said, you stay on the side of caution, and it's almost this
Yeah,
science is it's the quest to know, right?
yeah.
You can't say yes I know or yes
Mm.
I believe. It's like, well, let me discover, let me use some sort
Yeah,
of process, let my peers validate this,
yeah,
let it be proven over time. What are the instruments, what is the reliability, validity of this instrument? So it's, I
yeah.
suppose, those the conglomerate of different things coming together. um
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah.
a good question. That, I mean,
Mm,
just to
yeah.
reiterate, again, I mean, as archaeologists, archaeology as a discipline has been around for a very long time, and there have
Yes.
been various theoretical and methodological developments in the discipline of archaeology, that essentially shape how we think today. And that
Mm,
is absolutely
sure.
critical when we're thinking about how we conceptually frame our research, how we frame our research questions, what we can and can't ask within the context of the data that we have either been able to generate or the data that we cannot generate. So there is very much a case of us being scientists true to the word in the sense that we try to perform as good a science as possible and come up with interpretations that are well framed within the available data and literature.
Oh, cool. And then there's a question here, what's the most misunderstood thing about archaeology?
Dinosaurs. We hit it in the
Dinosaurs.
first few minutes.
Yes.
Dinosaurs. That's the one. I get it so often. I mean, I love it. I mean, because I love dinosaurs as well. I think who
Yeah.
doesn't like dinosaurs? They're really interesting. In fact, I think
Yeah.
in my next life, I think I'll specialize in paleontology. I've got a few friends who are paleontologists as well, and we can all have the same funny discussions about traveling and being in the
Yeah.
field and doing research, being covered in dust and doing our thing. So yes, I would say that
Dinosaurs. Yeah.
dinosaurs are absolutely right up there.
Thought
And
about
really, that's the difference. Really, paleontology, we're looking at
paleontology.
fossils, fossils and dinosaurs and things like that.
Mm,
Early reptiles and stuff. Whereas with
mm,
archaeology, as I mentioned, we're looking at the
the
history
human
of humans through
humans. Yeah.
tangible evidence that we have
Mm,
created and left behind. Yeah.
sure. And then there's a question here, which I think is a good one,
Mm.
around tools and technology that you use for modern excavations. Yeah, what kind of those tools and technology?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think things have changed a lot.
Mm,
Given a lot of kind of improvements in the technology in terms of the instruments that we can use on site.
yes,
There have also been
yes.
notable improvements in smartphone technology as well. Now
Mm,
we have
we spoke
such
about
powerful
this. Yeah.
devices literally in our pockets, and I mean, I use my smartphone in research now. So there's just to use one example, because obviously I could talk a lot about all the different things that we do use. Um, but I don't know if you recall, and I'm sure some of your listeners will be smiling as I'm describing this, or
Mm,
maybe we still do it on our phones. But remember when you could take your phone
yeah.
and you could take it to the camera app, and then you could hold it up and move it in an arc, and it would sit
Mm,
there snapping shots, and it would go click, click,
mm,
click, click, and then it would stitch together an elongated kind of
mm,
image, a landscape image. Do you
mm,
remember that? I mean, this was a while back now, but what I'm
mm,
talking about there is it's the phone then stitched the images together, and it
yeah.
created a single image. And essentially, what that is it's what we call photogrammetry, and it's where you can have
Photogrammetry.
lots
Mm,
of photos stuck together, and you
mm,
can then recreate a particular scene or whatever. We now have that technology in our phones. I have it in my phone now,
sure.
where you can take uh, a series of overlapping photographs of a fossil, of a particular rock, of a structure, a human-made structure, and you can generate 3D models just
Mm,
by using software on your phone. You can do it on the computer as well, and you can stitch together all of these 3D images using programs that use the technology of photogrammetry, and it's incredible. And you can get really, really accurate
sure.
3D models. You can generate really accurate 3D models. So we now use this in our archaeological sites. We do full 3D models of our archaeological sites simply by taking photos. It really is incredible.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Um, and this is a question, but maybe I'll ask it. Well, okay, let me quickly ask it because we're already talking tools. So I was curious because obviously this is a science, and usually sometimes, not even sometimes, most of the time we think science, we think head knowledge, right? But
Mm.
so in terms of being trained to be an archaeologist, is there a physical part of this qualification, or do you partner with people who operate these tools? Because I'm just thinking, I'm a girly girl. I want my nails to be messed up if I'm gonna do this.
Okay. I see where this conversation is going,
Yeah.
Bongeka. So you're one of those students. Okay. So I know. So having run multiple Wits field schools, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree with what I'm going to
Yeah.
say. We fully appreciate that not everybody and not all students are
Yes.
cut out for field work, you know.
Yeah.
And very often we work in some really challenging remote environments. I'll tell you a story now.
Yeah.
But yes, and that's why, because archaeology is so multidisciplinary, and because
Mm.
we have the option to either go into the field and dig and collect fresh artifacts, or you could potentially do a more lab-based project, either working
Mm.
on a computer or working on legacy collections in a museum. There's a range of different options, but what I will say is one has to
Mm.
go through the training process. So we
Mm.
encourage our students obviously to attend their field schools. They don't do a field school in first year, they do excursions, but then there's a
Okay.
field school in second year, and there's a
Again.
field school in third year. And for
Mm.
those students that are serious with carrying on, it's critical to get into the field.
Mm.
And I mean, to just start to put the theory into practice, because that's really where
Wait.
the magic happens. Whenever young students come to me and they say, "Oh, I don't know if I can't decide on archaeo," I just say, get into the field. Just go and talk to a staff member, whoever's excavating. What if I'm excavating? I'll invite them along. It's so much fun, because then the process of learning
Yeah.
becomes that much more tangible. When I'm talking to my
Mm.
students about what a stone tool is, yes, I can show them a picture in my lecture,
It's
but when
different.
they when
Yeah.
they get to excavate a stone tool and pull it out the ground themselves and hold something that hasn't seen the sun for the last 500,000 years, that's where the penny drop happens. So really, we do try and design, or at least I try and design my kind of field work components to
Yeah.
be a bit easy, but sometimes it isn't. So to come back to what I was going to say, sometimes we excavate in very inhospitable
Urgent.
environments. Sometimes there's lions and elephants running around. I've got funny stories about that.
No,
And sometimes we're
I'm not joining you,
excavating.
Matt.
Yeah, sometimes we're excavating in 48-degree heat, where it's
Sure.
just, we're waking up at 4 in the morning, and we're then trying to excavate before the sun reaches the peak. So, but again, those are kind of more the exception than the norm. We normally
Yeah.
always try and time our field schools so that the timing is good. There isn't too much rain. It's not too hot, not too cold. But sometimes, it's an outdoor discipline. We're exposed to the elements,
Yeah.
but there are obviously those components of the discipline where you can quite happily sit inside with a nice cup of tea behind a computer and still contribute immensely to our discipline. So there's a full range of
Yeah.
options.
Okay, cool. And then this one, the conundrum of faith and science. So there's a question here around, do archaeologists believe in the Bible? And I suppose this is a question that comes up a lot around science,
Mm,
and faith, and the things that our faith books, like the Bible, note. I mean, I know some scientists who, through their work, conform or confirm, English,
mm,
that
mm,
verify some of the things, through the
mm.
through the scientific work. But what are your views around this question?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think
Mm,
for me, it's a bit of a tricky one to answer, because,
yeah,
when people say to me, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm an archaeologist. That's what I do for a living. So essentially, I
yeah,
study human evolution. I study human
yeah,
evolution for a living. That's what I
yes.
do.
Mm,
And I
mm,
look at it from the perspective of material culture, stone tools. I don't look at the hominins or the hominids, the fossil
mm,
evidence. Okay, I'm not a
mm,
paleoanthropologist like Professor Ron Clark, for example. I
mm.
work with colleagues like that, but I look at it from
Okay.
a stone tool perspective. So, but
Yes.
to talk to the broader question, science, faith,
Yeah.
really, I think it's up to you as an individual.
Mm,
I know that there are archaeologists in our field who do have their
mm,
own, excuse me, particular religious beliefs and stuff, and I
mm,
think there's space for that. There's opportunity for that. I
mm.
think as a discipline, we're certainly not exclusionary. I think it's
Yeah.
just a little bit more tricky for me, given
Mm,
my subject matter. I've
mm,
seen the fossils. I've
mm,
seen the archaeological levels that have been dated to millions of years. I have seen the hard evidence. I've excavated the sites myself. So
mm,
I have my particular beliefs and stuff, but again, not to the exclusion of anybody else's beliefs.
mm,
So I think there's ample space for that. and I think it's important that there is that kind of space to allow
Mm,
for everybody's opinions and things like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Coming back to some of my other colleagues maybe who obviously may have different beliefs and stuff. Some of them work in different periods. They don't
yeah,
work in deep time, and I say deep time loosely because if there are any paleontologists in
yes,
your chat today, they're probably going to be laughing at me because deep time for paleontologists, we're talking hundreds of millions of years. Whereas,
yeah.
when we're talking about humans and our species,
Stone
it's a
Age,
very,
yeah.
very, very
Small
small
time,
sliver of
yeah.
time in terms of the greater scheme of things, in terms of how old the planet is. But again, that's another subject for discussion. Yeah.
You know what I'm learning? One of the things I'm learning is I'm talking to you. Yo, there are so many fields. Okay, that's a very South African thing, yo. The people who are not South African, you will. but like you spoke about gabiology, peloton. Like I'm like, so there's a field of study for everything under the
Pretty
sky,
much,
clearly.
pretty much,
Sure,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. The
sure.
world is just filled with
It's
opportunities to
it's
learn, and I
the
think
world
coming back
is
to
full
your theme
color.
for the series and stuff, full color,
Yeah.
exactly.
Full
There's so
color.
many
Yeah.
opportunities, and I hope your listeners. I see we're coming up on time. I really hope
Yeah.
your listeners have enjoyed, what they've heard today. Obviously, I'm happy to continue engaging with questions and stuff, offline as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, really, that's what it's about. And I
Okay.
think as archaeologists, we're always interested in the human journey. So yeah,
In the
lots of
human
questions to be
journey.
answered. Mm,
Yeah, I think this one is an important, particularly because I do have young people, also the young people growing up today are digital natives, they watch YouTube,
mm,
but I also want there to be educational and thought nourishing content.
mm.
So for a young person wanting to get into this field, I mean, I suppose you can speak for the context of South Africa. How does one go about it? Like what kind of subjects must you take in high school? And yeah, maybe take us through that journey and how do you apply to university, what should you be applying
Mm.
for, and what job opportunities are there. I know you spoke about researchers from an
Yeah,
academic point of view, but what are the other portals of opportunities are there to make money? Because at the end of the
yeah.
day, we do live in
No,
a world where we have to
yeah.
make money. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So just to come to your first question in terms of what one would have to do at secondary level in order to get into
Yeah.
archaeology, there's no specific requirement. As long as you can
Okay.
get into university, so as long as you kind of meeting the standards, you would then obviously need to go to a university that offers archaeology as a discipline. Some
Yes.
universities
Yes.
offer anthropology, which is a little bit different. Sometimes archaeology and
Mm,
anthropology are lumped together in the same department, so that sometimes happens as well. Obviously, Cape Town has a very well-known archaeology department. Wits obviously has a very well-known one as well,
yes.
and there are others too. So it's just a case of getting your foot in the door at university. Then, depending on the university, you would then have the option to take archaeology as one of your subjects, either as a BA student, so a Bachelor of Arts, or potentially as a Bachelor of Science.
Mm,
Archaeology at Wits, we fall archaeology, geography, environmental studies. We're in the Faculty of Science,
science.
so we
Mm,
encourage our students to come through that route, but many come through the BA route. So I hope that kind of answers that question. In terms of then the opportunities with archaeology, and I'm glad you raised this question, um, because I think sometimes people have a kind of narrow idea of what it is that you can actually do in archaeology, when really, because our discipline is so multidisciplinary now and there's many opportunities to
mm,
upskill yourself with particular technologies, you could end up working somewhere where you maybe
never
never
know.
thought that it was possible. To give you an
Sure.
example,
Mm,
I used to tutor a student when he was a young postgrad. Um, he eventually carried on his studies and eventually he left Wits, but he specialized in working with a particular technology or program, sorry, called Geographic Information Systems, GIS. It's a very
mm,
powerful software. It's very
mm,
powerful because it can be used um, within many different industries and
mm,
across different periods and whatever. So it's a kind of all-encompassing program that we use for
sure.
urban planning, for example.
Mm,
And he is now working in the UK for the central government of London, which is incredible.
mm.
So he never
What?
saw, yeah, I mean, and I mean,
Sure.
he's looking at urban planning and all these types of things. So,
Wow.
really, you're not tied in. You're
Yeah.
not just as an archaeologist going to have to go work in a museum. or to work in academia, for example, what I'm
Mhm.
doing. When I finished my postgraduate studies, there were no jobs. Okay.
Mm,
And I then spoke to two friends of mine, and we started our own commercial heritage company. So we entered the kind of commercial space, and we conducted heritage impact assessments, archaeological impact assessments. We worked with several companies within that space doing joint ventures and stuff. So we essentially became consultants, specialist
sure.
consultants. So, we got involved in the kind of commercial sector side of things with heritage management. Um, just to kind of rewind a bit, heritage impact assessments and archaeological impact assessments form part of environmental impact assessments. So if
Mm,
a development needs to happen, just to explain to the listeners, if a development needs to happen, if a mall needs to be built, a mine needs to be developed, etc., what needs to happen is an environmental impact assessment, and a component of that is getting specialist archaeologists, as well as many other specialist biologists, ecologists, to go to that particular area to make sure that nothing is going to be destroyed. And if it is, we then may collect a sample, for example, or we may recommend that they move the development elsewhere. So there's various steps and processes.
mm,
So we did that. We created essentially jobs for ourselves because the jobs weren't available, and we knew that
mm,
there was space within the commercial sector where we could be private consultants. So again, coming back to being very deliberate as a young undergrad and then moving through your postgrad studies, develop those skills, because it's the skills
mm.
that you're going to take forward. It's not necessarily you just stepping out of an accounting degree saying, hey, I'm an accountant
Okay.
now. You've got to have the
Doesn't
skills.
work that way.
any
Yeah,
employer any employer is going to tell you,
yeah,
right, well, you're an accountant, but then what
yeah,
what have you specialized in? What particular, are you a forensic accountant? Have you developed
yeah.
skills in that particular area? What portfolios have you worked at? What case studies have you looked at? So
Mm,
you really have to be quite deliberate. Yeah. So there's a range of different options in terms of what's available. Obviously, there's the commercial side of things, there's the museum side of things as well. But using these types of technologies and programs, you could potentially look at employment well beyond archaeology as well, which is quite interesting.
mm, beautiful. Thank you so much, Matt. I think we'll stop there for this evening because
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think you've given us so many gems. I want to thank you so much for joining this conversation. I want to thank everybody who was able to dial in, and the guys that are also still going to watch this. I know there's some comments here. As an avid documentary observer, in brackets, I fall asleep to them. I think that this was referring to the icebreaker. But this has been fascinating. It's a proper insider's view. Thank you for that. Very informative topic. I'm learning a lot. So yeah, those are some of the comments, and I'm sure more people will engage even after we've
Mhm.
gone live. Matt, thank you. I appreciate you. Let me give you back your time with your
No,
family.
thank you, Bongeka, and thank you
Yeah.
to the listeners as well. It was really great to engage with them as well, and to answer the questions and stuff. And yeah, I just really appreciate the time. Thanks for being patient with me and my schedule, and for making time today.
Okay.
It's been great to spend time with you and stuff, and to chat about these things that I really
Yeah.
love, that I'm very passionate about, as I'm sure
I
you
can
can tell.
see. I can
It's
tell.
really,
Yeah.
archaeology has just given me so much. It really has.
Mm, 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 mm,
And I love talking about it and stuff, and telling people, and very often I share these stories with
mm,
my first years, let them know that,
mm.
yeah, it can be a very exciting journey, and there's still so much we didn't talk about, but
Okay.
for another day and
Yeah.
another time. Yeah.
Like that. A life of experiences. That's one of my
Mm.
biggest takeaways. Thank you, Matt. Have a wonderful evening. And yeah, everybody, if you're in South Africa, have a wonderful evening. If you're in another part of the world, good morning, hello, whatever time. But be blessed and see you in the next installment. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.